Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talos of Tech, live on Twitch. Hope you enjoyed today's video. I was looking forward to making that for a while, but more video topics just came into my mind, and I always like to try to space topics a little bit away from each other, so sometimes it gets on my nerves when people just do iPhone video after iPhone video, so I try to avoid that, other than like Apple events and stuff. So we talked about some MacBooks, we talked about the Apple Watch a little bit, but I think this is my last video I'll do on the iPhone SE for a while. Obviously, my wife still has it, so when it comes to long-term reviews, we'll probably bring her on the channel occasionally and just be like, hey, how are you enjoying the SE from time to time? But not that often. So I think this is going to be the last one. There's a lot of videos leading up on the second generation SE. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, because I want to bounce ideas off you and see, hopefully, if some of you can disagree with me, because I don't want to believe what I'm talking about today, and that's the iMac Pro was more than likely at this point a placeholder, or some people call it a stopgap. It was a product that was intended for... Oh, I had a little bit of lag there. Sorry if you got that. I'm going to stop the playback. Sometimes the Wi-Fi freaks out. The iMac Pro might never get refreshed, is what I'm saying. And what I mean by that is the iMac Pro basically hasn't ever been refreshed since its introduction in 2017. All they did, I think, was in 2019, they added some... Wow, the sun just randomly decided to show up. They added a RAM option for 256 gigs, and they added a GPU option that wasn't previously available. But that's it. They have not changed the storage. They have not changed the CPU options. It's crazy to me that you can get a 16-inch MacBook Pro with 8 terabytes of SSD, but the iMac Pro still maxes out at 4. Still maxes out at 4. Another crazy thing that bugs the heck out of me, even though I'm not someone who's going to buy the Pro Display XDR, you cannot run the Pro Display XDR at 6K with the iMac Pro. You can plug it in, but it will not support the full 6K resolution. It will be downclocked to 5K on the 32-inch panel. So I always thought that was a little bit bizarre in the fact that the Pro Display XDR came out in December, and that's coming up on 6 months now, and they still have not updated the iMac Pro with the proper drivers or video output potential to support full 6K Pro displays. So, Overachiever, thank you for the bits. Appreciate it. I don't know if it is the price gap between it and the Mac Pro indicates it is probably not a placeholder. I think it's that iMacs are just neglected as a whole. Here's my theory. I'll go into it in a bit because I agree. The Mac Pro is insanely high priced. I think if anyone buys a Mac Pro, they probably shouldn't get the base model because the specs of the base model are atrocious. The 256 gigs of storage, the GPU, the Radeon Pro 580, that thing's a joke on the Mac Pro. So it technically starts at $6,000, but that's without a monitor, and the base model that's $6,000 is trash. So most people are probably not spending $6,000 on the Mac Pro unless they're just buying it and then taking it apart and filling it up with their own stuff. So I think the Mac Pro is obviously for ultra high enterprise level, video editing and people with those insane budgets, but I think whenever Apple decides to refresh the iMac line, not referring to the iMac Pro, just the regular iMacs, those are going to be taking over where the iMac Pro currently sits, at the people who want a desktop all-in-one within the $5,000 to $10,000 price margin. My guess is once they start refreshing the iMacs, the prices that you can configure them up to are going to be a bit higher, but the performance will be rivaling that of the iMac Pro. For example, if you go to Apple's website right now and you max out the 27-inch iMac, put in the best SSD, which is 2 terabytes, put in the best GPU you can, put in the best CPU you can, you will actually make a machine that can outperform the base model iMac Pro for cheaper. Not to mention, you do not have to upgrade the RAM in the 27-inch iMac when you're ordering it. You can ship it with the default RAM and then upgrade it yourself, which is actually really easy to do on the 27-inch iMac, but not easy to do on the iMac Pro. That's not user upgradable because of the cooling system they designed with the iMac Pro. But that's besides the point. I think that there may be redesigns in development for a redesigned iMac, like we're hearing about this 23-inch iMac. Maybe Apple's listening. And certain times it feels like Apple watches our videos, and occasionally it feels like Apple makes decisions based on what people wanted. You know, people missed the cheese grater. People wanted more upgradable Macs. And the Mac Pro is very upgradable. So in a lot of ways, it feels like they listen and respond. So I hold myself out there and hope that there's some people at Apple's Mac team that are like, okay, some people don't want a MacBook. They want a large display that can sit on their desk. They want it to be an all-in-one. They don't care that much about upgradability, but they need some type of design shift. They need an upgrade. They need a more modern look. So for the sake of simplicity, they're just going to make all desktop all-in-ones look fairly similar. They're just going to refer to them as the iMac, and the iMac Pro was simply a middle step, brief moment where Apple wanted to have a high-powered iMac with better internals that was really, really powerful for the time being before the Mac Pro launched. And now that the Mac Pro has launched, Apple doesn't care about the iMac Pro, and any further development towards desktop all-in-ones is just going to be spent on the regular iMac, which we're hearing is getting a refresh soon, maybe even tomorrow. By the time some of you are watching this, there could have been an iMac refresh. They like to drop stuff on Wednesdays, and tomorrow's a Wednesday, so that's why I'm thinking maybe the iMac refresh will be tomorrow, but it could just be storage improvements. I don't know. We'll see. Also, I wanted to thank earlier TVTube. Subscribe with Twitch Prime for 20 months. Holy cow, 20 months. Thank you. All right, let's hear your guys' ideas. They might refresh the iMac Pro. Only reason why is that the Mac Pro doesn't include a screen and stuff. The iMac Pro is a good, decent middle ground between an iMac and Mac Pro, but it should be cheaper. It was. I would kind of agree with you. I would say it used to be a good middle ground, but at this point, if someone is in the market for spending around $5,000 on a desktop all-in-one, I don't even think I could recommend the iMac Pro anymore unless you're buying used or you're buying it from some Best Buy or eBay or something and it's significantly discounted. Because if you're buying new from Apple, what you get from the 27-inch iMac is better now. Like, you can get a higher performing machine. Like, follow along with me. Come on, let's do Twitch picture-in-picture if you're watching this on your iPad. Let's go to the Apple Store app, and you can walk through and you'll see what I mean. They've done performance tests on the updated iMacs, which got new CPUs last year. iMac Pro hasn't gotten a new CPU since it initially launched, so if you want more evidence that they don't really care about it, and they might not ever refresh it. So let's swipe down here. Let's try to max out the 27-inch iMac. Starts at $2,300. Fairly reasonable if you're getting a 5K display with that and default with a 6-core. Okay, we're upgrading it. 3.6 gigahertz, 8-core, 9th gen Intel core, turbo boost to 5 gigahertz. 8 cores that can turbo boost to 5 gigahertz. And that machine's still $2,700. Compare that to the MacBook Pros. It's insane. I'm going to leave the RAM the way it is. If you upgrade the GPU, it becomes a Radeon Pro Vega 48 with 8 gigabytes of memory. That's far more comparable to what the iMac Pro base GPU is. If you max out the storage to 2 terabytes of SSD, that's obviously going to add $1,000. You can leave RAM alone because you can upgrade that yourself very simply. But let's say even if you didn't want to upgrade it yourself, 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM, still under $5,000, and you have a machine that's probably going to outperform the base iMac Pro. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, what about the higher tier configurations? What about people that are spending closer to $10,000 on the iMac Pro? And I guess there's somewhat of a market for that, but I feel like it's dwindling. I think that once you get above the base model iMac Pro, you start competing more with those base entry Mac Pro prices. So that's what makes me think that iMac Pro is going to be slowly forgotten and just replaced with the 27-inch or 32-inch, whatever the refreshed design is, whenever that comes along. I don't think they're giving up on desktop all-in-ones. I just think they're giving up on the particular, just off camera, that particular desktop all-in-one. It feels like they're not too concerned with its specs, its prices, or even providing the most up-to-date options for it. Let's see. I think we might see smaller bezels on the new iMacs, much like the 16-inch MacBook Pro, but I'm going to be honest, a full design refresh seems unlikely. It seems like Apple doesn't really care about the iMac anymore. Not soon. The redesigned, refreshed look with thinner bezels and everything, that's not coming soon. The only rumors slightly alluding to it is, I think Ming-Chi Kuo and Mac Dakara. Ming-Chi Kuo said they're working on desktops desktop iMacs that have mini LED, and if they're adopting mini LED, I assume they would at least look somewhat like the Pro display with the thin bezels. But I don't think that's going to be an iMac Pro. That's my point. I think that's going to be just the new iMacs. I think they're just going to introduce new iMacs with thin bezels and better displays. And Mac Takara referenced a 23-inch iMac, which means a new design. So a lot of us assume that means thinner bezels, but I don't know. Let's see. Guess who's getting his Twitch set up now? I got to see how this is different. Hey, Randy's in the chat. Welcome, Randy. CoinX said new iMacs soon. It must be. Yeah, the new iMacs coming soon are spec bumps. They're not design refreshes. There's two sets of iMac leaks right now. Very different. One is something that could happen at any time. One that could happen tomorrow is just iMacs with new storage configurations. That's probably all it's going to be. They're just going to double up some of the storage options. Hopefully ditch the Fusion drives and spinning hard drives because those are dated, and SSDs have gotten a lot cheaper now. So there's just no sense in Apple keeping that around. So that could happen at any time. But the redesigned iMacs with, different displays and updated front design and stuff, that's not rumored till at the very soonest late this year. More than likely 2021. Who knows? Let's see. You can put alien holes all over the back of the iMac now. Yeah, exactly. They'll make it look like a cheese grater iMac. Let's see. I think the reason we are getting so few Mac redesigns is because Apple knows ARM is right around the corner and they will have to redesign the Macs for ARM anyway, so why bother with a redesign for Intel that you have to change in a few years anyway? That's a decent argument. I think that's believable. I think ARM would probably come to the iMac last. iMac or Mac Pro. Those would be like the last Macs to get ARM. Obviously, the laptops are going to get them first. So I think the rollout is going to go 12-inch MacBook, and it's going to be its own thing. It's not going to be branded as a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. It's just going to be called MacBook, and it'll have a slightly tweaked design, maybe with more rounded edges or something like that. It'll just look like a very modern, like uniform bezeled MacBook, and people will be like, okay, that looks up to date, that looks modern, but it'll be running the ARM version of macOS, so it won't be able to run certain things like you can't run Minecraft or you can't run Adobe apps until those companies update their apps to support ARM, which they'll inevitably be slow about. I will not be shocked by that, but it'll have decent performance even though it doesn't have fans or something like that. And then in 2021, they'll start bringing that design. It'll kind of rival what Apple did with the original 12-inch MacBook. I don't know if you guys remember how this rollout went, but initially when they launched the 12-inch MacBook, the MacBook Pros weren't really anything like it. Wasn't this 2015? It was like 5 years ago. It was the first time a Mac had USB-C. It was like, hey guys, one port can do everything. Charging, power, data, video output, audio output. You can do everything through the one USB-C port. It had the butterfly keyboard. And it had this really thin, very, very light design. And I thought it was really cool. It was just not very powerful. But design-wise, it was great. But then they slowly brought that design to the rest of the lineup. So the following year, in 2016, that's when they made the MacBook Pro's butterfly keyboard and thinner and USB-C, and they embraced it on the MacBook Pros. And then eventually, I think it was 2018, they brought it to the MacBook Air. So I think kind of similar to how they use the MacBook as this entry point of like, hey, this is the thin and light design we want Macs to be like. And then they take and learn from that product and apply it to the Air and the Pro. I think that's how the rollout of ARM is going to go. So it's going to be 12-inch MacBook this year. Next year, maybe MacBook Air with slightly better CPU, slightly better GPU. This tweaked design, but of course running macOS ARM, so it's still going to be kind of limiting software-wise. And that's what Apple will be like, okay, well, if you want that Pro software and you want more options, you can try out the MacBook Pros, which will still be rocking Intel CPUs probably for the first half of next year. And then maybe after that, that's when they start introducing ARM to the MacBook Pros. After MacBook Pros, they mainstream those a little bit. They update the CPUs and GPUs, make them really powerful, objectively faster than anything Intel can put in their laptops currently. And then after that, maybe you get an ARM Mac Mini. Then after that, ARM iMac. After that, ARM Mac Pro. Which all of this conversion, I think, will take years and years and years. I think there will probably be a big gap between when MacBooks get ARM and when iMacs get ARM, just because iMacs are so neglected. Randy says, what if iMac Pro features come to regular iMacs, color, webcam, more IOs, and that's why we're not seeing an update? The sad thing is we are seeing an update. It's going to happen anytime now, and I'm pretty confident it's not even going to be a spec bump. I think it's mostly just going to be storage options are changing. So that's probably what the update is going to be. But yeah, I think that iMac Pro features will hopefully come to the iMac line. It would make it more justifiable. It would be like, okay, so the iMac Pro is gone, but a lot of the things we like about it are coming to other devices. So that's why it makes sense to me, like updating the webcam or better speakers, better thermals. Because, you know, the iMac Pro is a way better thermal management system than the 27-inch iMac. I used one of those for a long time, and that fan had to be cranking like all day in order for it to stay cool. And the speakers weren't as great, the webcam wasn't as great, and I know those aren't huge reasons to go with an iMac, but still, just like a lot of the nifty, handy things about the iMac Pro, I wish they could bring to the regular iMacs. Let's see. They still put a headphone jack on the 12-inch for some reason. Yeah, they have not. They have not removed the headphone jack on any Mac. So Apple sees it as a benefit when removing it from things like the iPhone or the iPad, but they don't see the point in removing it from the Mac line. There's still not been a single Mac that they're like, yeah, you don't need the headphone jack. And I think it's because most Macs are fairly large in comparison to iPads, which are super thin and super light, and iPhones, which of course are super small. So removing the headphone jack frees up a lot more space compared to a Mac, whereas removing the headphone jack on a MacBook probably wouldn't allow you to do anything differently. It would just be gone for the sake of it being gone, and that would probably tick off people, and Apple just doesn't see the point. Let's see, fairly quick. You guys have to remember the transition from PowerPC to Intel had the exact same compatibility issue. They still brought it to everything fairly quickly. We'll see. Oh, my iMac just decided to wake up for some reason. Okay. Let's see. I don't think it will take Apple years to get on ARM. Once it's ready, they're going to jump everything over just like they did with Intel. I think back with Intel, I'm going to go ahead and say it's safe to assume the switch to ARM will not be exactly the same as switching from PowerPC to Intel because the market is different now. And there's a lot of legacy software that people are still going to be angry about not being supported on ARM. And I don't think that this is not Steve Jobs' Apple anymore. Steve Jobs was around for the transition from PowerPC to Intel. He's not around today. So we got a little bit more crowd pleasers involved at Apple, and we got a little bit more people saying, you know, hey, everyone asked for dark mode, so we got to do dark mode. It's not the same Apple that it was before. You know, Steve Jobs was more the guy that would want something like the trash can Mac Pro, whereas Tim Cook is the kind of guy to endorse the cheese grater coming back in the 2019 Mac Pro. So I think it'll be a little bit slower than that transition just because we don't have as many people like Steve, and also Apple has shown extreme neglect in the iMac department. When Steve was around, the iMac was more noticeably refreshed year over year. There was more design changes, and there were more leaps and bounds being made in that department. Whereas we're in a very different climate now where desktops are not that common. They're losing popularity. Less people are buying them just because you can get so much performance out of a laptop now, and you can convert a laptop into a desktop fairly simply and cheap and not compromise that much on performance. So I think for that reason, they'll probably delay or not adopt ARM that quickly across the entire lineup, especially if they spent all this money and they spent all this time on making the Mac Pro all modular and upgradable by the user. It wouldn't make sense for them to, like, in 2 years just discontinue all of that. Well, it's all ARM now, so you can't buy new stuff. Now we're just going to get rid of that Mac Pro and replace it with an ARM Mac Pro that's not as upgradable or not as modular. That doesn't sound like them. I think that the cheese grater Mac Pro that's available today is going to be around, and modules and upgraded stuff that you can buy from Apple that supports that will be around for a little bit longer. Do you really think Apple would buy 120 hertz displays to then lock them at 60 hertz? Doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, it kind of makes sense to me. It does sound like something Apple would do. I mean, there was a lot of talk about bilateral wireless charging. I can't tell you how many reports and rumors there were for, iPhone 11, that'll have bilateral wireless charging. That's for sure. That's going to happen. And then it wasn't until, I think it was less than a week before the iPhone event that Kuo was like, actually, they canceled it. Actually, they turned that off. Um, and they even left some of the hardware in there for the bilateral wireless charging. Not all of it. It's not like you can jailbreak your iPhone and make it support that, but um, they didn't completely take it out of the phone. It was like right the day before. So the idea that Apple is experimenting with 120 hertz, and if it doesn't meet their standards, they're just gonna not announce it and leave it at 60. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it's something they could do. Uh, let's see. Is the space podcast going to be the podcast on the podcast? We don't have any video for the space podcast, so I don't know. I think there's a massive difference between that and the price between 60 and 120 hertz displays. Yeah, but these are the Pro iPhones. They don't care if they cost more, so I think they knew that they had to get manufactured. It's kind of a weird year because of the pandemic and because of things being closed off. So it doesn't shock me at the idea that they were like, okay, well, we're trying to tweak, iOS, and we're trying to tweak the A14 chip to be capable of supporting 120 hertz, but we're having a hard time ironing out. We're having a hard time getting it to behave correctly. So let's just buy the 120 hertz panels and install those, and then keep trying to iron it out and keep trying to get it to work before they officially launch. So I could see that, yeah. It doesn't sound impossible. But like I said in my video, I think the 12 Pro will be a massive flop. And I feel like so many people have a hard time understanding my argument about that. I think people keep thinking I'm saying that the 12 will flop. I'm like, no, I titled this video very intentionally. It's like 12 Pro will flop because everyone will go with the 12. Because all the comments or all the tweets I get from it are like, people don't care about that. I'm like, I know. But if they're... That's why everyone's going to go with the 12 anyway. The 12 is going to sell great. The 12 Pro, 120 hertz or not, is not going to sell that well. Which is why even if it doesn't even have that, like even if it has 120 hertz, it's not going to sell anywhere near as well as the regular 12s because there's so little differences between them. And if they don't even have 120 hertz as an advantage, I'm like, that's going to be even less reason for people to upgrade. So that's why I would consider it a flop if it doesn't. Thank you, Mess00, for the Twitch Prime for 15 months. Random but curious how much you put down in your home when you first purchased it. I want to tell you, but I don't want to get into specifics on the price of the house because it's not so much that I want that to be private. It's just that people can use that information to look up my house. So for my own privacy, I don't know if I want to go into it. I'm trying to decide whether or not that's revealing. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna I think I've said before what percentage we put down, so I don't want people calculating exactly how much it was, but sorry. Do you think it would be possible that they could lock the 12 Pros to 60 at launch, and then if they iron out the kinks later, they could introduce 120 hertz in a later software update, or is that not an Apple thing to do? Honestly, it doesn't sound like something they would do. I highly doubt that they would just send out a software update that says, hey, we have 120 hertz now. You're welcome. To me, it sounds more like they would just reserve that for next year because they're going to have a hard time thinking of things to add to the 2021 iPhone. Because this year already has so many changes. It's not... Anytime you have a year with a bunch of changes, it's going to be followed by a minor year. It's inevitable. Just like the Apple Watch Series 5, just like the iPhone XS. XS was kind of a cheat year, though, because we got the XR and the XS Max. So that kind of felt like a bigger year than it really was. In comparison to other S years, it was pretty major because we got 2 new form factors and new screen sizes. But yeah, if you were just looking at 10 to XS, obviously, it's a very small year. But since we already have 4 screen sizes, new form factors and everything, all getting that this year, if they can't figure out 120 hertz this year, they will more than likely just say, okay, we'll figure it out, and then that'll be the selling point of the 2021 iPhone. Okay, we have a promotion now, which I will be very, very disappointed by. I do not want to wait another year for 120 hertz. 10 was the prototype, XS and XS Max was the refined. Well, yeah, if you go back and listen to what Apple has said about the 10, they initially wanted to launch that in 2018, but we're pretty confident that because of the competition, particularly phones like the Galaxy S8, Apple decided to launch the OLED iPhone early. The development for the 10 design, with Face ID and no home button and everything, this has been in development for a long time, and they were shooting for 2018. And that was going to be when they introduced, the 5.8-inch model, the 6.5-inch model. It was just going to be a whole lineup. But because of the Galaxy S8 and competitors making bezels thinner and thinner, they knew that releasing just the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, and that was it, in 2017, was going to be that was going to be financial suicide, because the iPhone 7 was already getting a lot of complaints for not looking different enough, and it was too similar to the 6S. So they were like, okay, we got to do something big in 2017, and that's why it was kind of only 2 color options, only 2 storage options. It was very limited. They had to delay the launch until November because they kind of rushed to get the 2017 iPhone 10 out, because initially it was planned for 2018. So makes sense looking back at it. iPhone 12 Pro upgrade without 120 or USB-C. 10-bit color, because my biggest complaint about my 11 Pro is the lack of colors. That's probably what it'll be. It'll be some kind of nits thing or dynamic range thing or some, yeah. But no. I mean, we can bicker back and forth whether or not we think it was rushed, but the fact is that following the leaks behind the scenes, it was definitely not launching on schedule, because Apple always wants to reveal and start shipping their new iPhones in September, and that was the one time they unveiled it in September, but it wouldn't deliver until November. That's not that common. That doesn't happen a lot. And they launched the iPhone 8 first because the production was so limited and so low in supply for the iPhone 10. So I think, wasn't it Craig who talked about it in a podcast later? He was like, this was initially not supposed to come out until 2018, but we rushed it. It seemed dire now. Apple still ironed it out, but I mean, just in the grand scheme of things, it was ahead of its time. Same happened with the 10R. That was also because they were low on display display manufacturing. There weren't enough people. There weren't enough companies making the type of display that the 10R used. But that was a slight delay compared to the iPhone 10. That was a more massive delay of like 2 months after unveiling. How does it feel having been a guest on the #1 tech podcast? I don't even know which one you're referring to. Currently on the 17 Pro. I was so hyped to get the 12 Pro Max, but man, with 60 hertz, I think I'll buy another Android. See, I know a lot of people are like, 120 hertz isn't that big a deal, I can't see the difference. But my point is, the Pro iPhones are for the techies. They're for the nerds that care about that kind of thing. So if they can't even satisfy the nerds, who are they for? Who are they for? Who's supposed to be buying those things? If the rumors are true about the price, that will be good. It'll be great for the 12 Max and the regular 12, whatever they end up calling those things. I think there was a leak recently. Didn't John say that they were going to be called 12 and 12 Max? Which, by the way, I totally called that. I predicted that like months ago. I think that was January. Yeah, because I was like, Plus is for services. They won't use Plus. They do use Max, so they'll call it 12 and 12 Max. And 12 Max will be the most popular one because it'll be 6.1-inch OLED, $750, dual camera, A14 chip, better Face ID. It'll just be like the best complete package. Most people will probably go with that. And we'll probably see a fairly decent uptick in performance of the 5.4-inch model. Because now people are going to be like, wait, you can get the iPhone 12 for $650? Insanely cheap. I didn't expect them to go that cheap. But if that price ends up being accurate, a lot of people will probably settle with the smaller form factor, I'm guessing, just for the sake of the lower price point. Apple called it Max because it has the biggest display in an iPhone, so calling it Max if it's the same 6.1-inch size doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, their naming doesn't make... Don't look for logic in the naming schemes. There's never been much logic there. Why call it the iPhone 8 and not the 7S? I don't know. Marketing. Max sounds good, so that's why they'll put it in 12 Max. That's why I wouldn't put it past them. The Plus has been reserved for services. They don't sell any Plus iPhones anymore. I think they reserve that for News Plus, TV Plus, and If it's a hardware, though, they'll just call it Max. They called it 10S Max, which no one thought they were going to do, and then they did it. Also, why is it called 10R? Well, just because R. That's why. I'm fine with 120 hertz, even though I can't see the difference, but I'm still a firm believer that the Pro iPhone should have USB-C. It makes no sense to me. iPad Pro can have it, but iPhone Pro can't. And no, but people will get mad if they change it. Argument doesn't work here because the Pros are for the nerds. I agree with you, Scott. I know the leaks and the rumors do not support my wishes, but for every single reason the iPad Pro got USB-C, I think the same logic can apply to the iPhone. It has everything to do with compatibility. It has nothing to do with feature ability. That was the whole reason they added it to the iPad Pro, is so it would be more compatible with third-party accessories. There was nothing the Lightning port couldn't do that USB-C could. People misunderstand that. Like, you had SD card readers. You had USB-C to Lightning cables. If you wanted to plug in cameras or external drives and stuff like that, you could do it through Lightning. Lightning was capable of doing that stuff, but USB-C supported the third-party accessories that everyone was using. So that's why they brought it to the iPad Pro. The same argument would apply with the iPhone. No one's saying Lightning can't do this and USB-C can do this. It's just we already have USB-C accessories for our MacBooks, for our iMacs, for our iPads, for GoPros, for cameras. Like, we have USB-C on everything. So just bring it to the iPhone so I don't have to carry around two cables. So it has everything to do with compatibility to me, and that's why I would love it if they had USB-C on the iPhone, even if I don't use it, because I do everything wirelessly anyway. So yeah, I wish they would, but it sounds like they're not going to, so I'm not counting on it. Let's see. It still doesn't make sense if there's a Max with a 6.1 inch and a 6.1 inch without Max. Yeah, but one is Pro. It's the Max version of the 12. Again, we're so past making sense. Don't try to make sense of iPhone naming. It's been screwed up since 2017. With your logic, you would be like, Apple would never call it the 10R. 10R doesn't make sense. They should call it 10C because that's what the 5C was. It's like, they don't care. They don't care. They will just do whatever makes sense for their marketing. It doesn't have to make sense for the lineup. It doesn't have to make sense for consistency. It doesn't have to... So many people said it won't be called iPhone SE because now I have to say SE 2020 edition. So that won't be it, and then it is. That's what it ends up being. 10R didn't make sense for lineup consistency, but they did it. 10S Max also sounds weird. It sounds weird is subjective, guys. Don't. It sounds weird because it's not confirmed. Once it's confirmed, you'll be used to it, and everyone will call it that. 10R sounds better than 10C. Again, because it's been announced. So you're used to it. I remember the leaks. I remember when CoinX first came forward and said it'll be called 10R. No one believed it. Everyone was like, no, that's not it. That can't be it. It doesn't make any sense. And then it comes out and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I hope they go with 12 this year. Let's just start doing numbers every year now, please. I think they're doing 12 this year because it's a massive design change, and the only time they do S years is when it's like speed improvements and not so much design changes. But that's why I think they'll probably have a 12S next year. But yeah, Roman numerals are basically done. The only iPhone that still has Roman numerals is the 10R, which is again confusing because people pronounce it XR, which I thought was a mistake from the get-go. A lot of people were like, no, it'll never be iPhone 10. That's always been a number. Why would they go to Roman numerals? And then they do. Why? Because we thought it looked good. So 12 Max probably sounds good for marketing. Because you can say, hey, I got the Max. Even if it's not the biggest size iPhone ever, it looks good on the side of the box. It looks good in commercials. That's enough for them. I can't wait for the 12S Pro Max. I know. It's going to suck, but they would do it. People will literally major in iPhone lineup naming. Like, this is more complicated than the entire Star Wars line. It's more complicated than Star Wars, but it's not more complicated than the X-Men timeline. Let's be fair. I don't hate USB-C. In fact, I hope Apple is going to add it in the iPhone, but at the end of the day, I'm going to carry multiple chargers for each device anyway. It's nice to be able to charge my laptop and my phone with one charger, but most of the time I'm charging my devices separately. Yeah, but if you didn't have to think about which wire you had with you, that's the whole point. You're not thinking, let me get my lightning cable, let me get my USB-C cable. You're just thinking, let me get a cable. And everything's USB-C, so you don't have to worry about what port's on the end of it. That's the idea. Exactly. Let's see. Should I upgrade my iPhone 10 to an 11 Pro? Probably not right now. You might want to wait till September when the new ones come out. But if you do have to upgrade right now, just get a discount. Get a deal on it. Any clue why Apple aren't inviting you to events, considering how devoted you are to the brand? There's not a bunch of people that are my size or my age that get invited. There's a lot of people that don't get invited for any number of reasons. Either way, I wouldn't go. I'm not an event person. I don't really enjoy going to events. So I'm more than happy watching all of the events online just because I prefer streaming my reaction. I don't want to sit in a crowded room full of people and I have to be quiet because there's a lot of fluff to Apple events. So I enjoy mocking them. If I got invited, I would probably send a friend or something. I'd be like, Nick, Randy, you go. And then maybe get some hands-on footage if there's demos or something and you can send it to me. But I don't like sporting events. I didn't go to my own high school graduation. I don't think I went to my middle school graduation. I just don't like big groups of gatherings of people or concerts. I went to a concert once. I didn't like it. It was loud and annoying and too many people in one place. It's not really my thing. So I don't care if they invite me or not. It wouldn't change what I do. But based on what I can tell, they typically invite people that are either very, very well known or like certified published journalists. I don't know anyone that gets invited that's my age. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. Maybe I'm just unproven. Maybe I'm not old enough and I'm not been in the industry for a while. But everyone I know who goes to those events is typically a lot older than me. So, I don't know. I'd still bring multiple chargers, but it would be nice to have all of them be the same cord. However, as Nick pointed out to me the other day, it's not like I'm going anywhere anytime soon, and I usually use wireless charging at home. Exactly. That's why I would like them to have USB-C, but I don't care at the end of the day because I'm not going to use Lightning or USB-C. I'm all in on wireless charging anyway. There's been occasional times I fast charge, but very rarely. It's not something I do regularly. If they remove the charge port, I'd be like, okay, fine, whatever. If I could get an 11 Pro Max, but with 120 hertz and no charge port, I would take it. That would be worth it to me. I would live with that. Okay, so I can't use a wire, but I get buttery smooth display. Awesome. I'm 22. Yes, I turned 22 in February, so I'll be 23 next year. Featured your podcast on the iPhone 11 commercial, so they're definitely aware of you. Yeah, I've also heard they excuse me. They don't like people that talk much about leaks. I know leaking stuff and talking about rumors and talking about future launches they don't like very much because that can hurt sales of current products. So maybe because I talk a lot about leaks or I talk a lot about what's rumored to come out or I tell people not to buy something and stuff like that. Apple doesn't like it when people do that. So either way, I don't care. I'm not going to be trying to get whitelisted or something. I'm not trying to get like approved. I'm not trying to do the right things and check the right boxes so I can go to the events because I don't care. I won't go regardless. Do you record in HDR? No, I don't think my camera supports that, and I don't think most people notice. I think HDR is one of those over-exaggerated, hyped-up things. That, like, it's not that noticeable if on the YouTube quality options they have to label it HDR. Almost every single video that is shot in HDR, they have to put HDR in the title because they're like, pay attention, look for the colors, because, if they didn't put HDR, no one would notice. Everyone would just watch it and be like, okay, looks like a video. That's about it. You should start live host rocket launches. Talos of Space, you would get some great hits on that. Talos of Space is all being managed by Nick, so talk to him about that stuff because my main focus right now is basically trying to make time for Twitch streams, Taylors of Tech, Taylors of EV, and Taylors of Talks. Those are like all my main focus right now. Everything else is out of my hands for the most part. If someone did live host rocket launches, it would be Nick, probably not me. HDR video would look like trash on non-HDR screens, so it's actually not a good idea. I've heard that too. I've heard people say HDR looks very, very bizarre. And I feel like you can achieve most of what HDR accomplishes in editing just by boosting up saturation. That's essentially what HDR does. It's just, look, it's so bright and colorful. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but majority of people watching do not have HDR capable devices anyway, so it's not a big deal. I don't think it would make that big a difference. Does Taylosive mean something? Yeah, you can look it up. I think it's Hello World episode 7. Just search that on YouTube and you'll find the meaning behind Taylosive, or just what does Taylosive mean? One of my vlogs will show up. It's a long story. I hope Final Cut makes it to iPadOS. Sounds like it is, but it might be a scaled down version of it. I don't think it'll be fully fledged Final Cut. It'll probably be, if it's running on iPads with 4 gigs of RAM, and I think it's reasonable to assume they might limit it to just iPad Pros, and they won't let you run it on any iPad. Like the budget iPad can't run Final Cut. Like, to me, it makes sense that they would make it a selling point to go with an iPad Pro over any other iPad. You'd be like, why would I get an iPad Pro if I can get an iPad Air or a budget iPad? It's way, way cheaper. It's like, well, those won't run Final Cut, so iMovie Plus. Yeah, that's what they should call it. iMovie Plus with a monthly $5 subscription, right? I would get that. Do you have any features you want out of iOS 14 other than stability and moved phone call notifications? Well, I did a whole video on it. It's basically just redesign pop-ups. Redesign pop-ups into notifications. That's all I'm asking for. It's more so than just the phone call animation. It's like when your battery is low, I don't want a pop-up in the center of the screen that says, 20% battery remaining. It should just be a drop-down notification that doesn't impede on your usage of the display. Or if you activate Siri, it should just drop down and start dictating and responding to you, but it doesn't have to turn off everything you're doing on the phone. It can just be a little slide over menu and stuff like that. So just redesigning pop-ups and stuff like that. No, I don't have much else for iOS 14. Stability would be nice, yeah. I haven't had a ton of bugs with iOS 13 though, so it's been stable for me. Not stable for everyone though, so I don't want a huge overhaul for iOS 14. Really want to be able to put app icons anywhere I want on the screen. I don't know, that's so simple, and yet we can't. People have been asking for that ever since the original iPhone, and they still haven't done it, so I imagine there's probably a reason for it or something. Is the Mac Mini worth buying? What do you think about it? I'm live streaming right now from the Mac Mini, but no, you probably shouldn't buy it. If you do get a Mac Mini, the thing is, they're very dated at this point. When they first came out, they were kind of cool. But now, they still don't have GPUs, and the thermal management on them is not great, and they still have 8th gen Intel CPUs, so they haven't been updated in a while. They just kind of doubled up the storage options, which really isn't an update at the end of the day. It's just kind of marketing. But if you do get a Mac Mini, find one that's refurbished or find it on sale or anything. Just don't pay full price for one. Don't go onto Apple's store. This is why I won't get invited to Apple events. Don't go to the Apple store and just buy one new, because those prices aren't very good compared to a used Mac Mini. And it's a Mac Mini. Why do you care if it's used? If it has some scratches on it, big whoop. It's like an oversized Apple TV. Who cares if it doesn't look pretty? It's just gonna sit on your desk. You're not gonna hold it or look at it. iMac Pros is somewhat flawed yet decent prosumer iMac. Yeah. It is, but it's in desperate need of a refresh, and I don't think it's going to get one. Certified refurbished counter, exactly. If I got $5 every time I recommended someone check certified refurbished, I'd be a very rich dude. I'm not expecting another iPad Air for a while. It won't get an A13 when the iPad Pro is an A12-based chip. They might... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a good reason to not update it, but whenever the iPad, I don't know when the iPad Air is going to come out, but whenever it comes out, I think it will look a lot like an iPad Pro. Um, I think the A12Z is still objectively better than the A13 though. What does the A13 do that the A12 can't? Like what? Like night mode stuff? I don't know. The neural net? I try to get certified refurbished from Apple or third party whenever I can. Yeah, especially if you go through Apple, it runs great. Usually it's brand new. Why do you think iMac Pro may not get an update? Because they're not paying much attention to it. It's been this long. There's rumors of an iMac refresh, but it's just going to be storage bumps, which means that while the iMac Pro has been announced, they've released the Pro Display XDR. iMac Pro still cannot support that at 6K. They've refreshed the iMac CPUs to 9th generation Intels. Haven't done anything with the iMac Pro. And now they're updating the storage options for the regular iMacs, and they still haven't done anything with the iMac Pro. They've provided 8 terabytes of storage as a configuration for both the 16-inch MacBook Pro and the Mac Pro, but they will not bring 8 terabytes to the iMac Pro for whatever reason, probably because they don't care. A13 is better in single-core performance, and it's more efficient because it's running inside an iPhone. Is it better single core than the A12Z? I feel like A12Z is still objectively faster. How come people don't notice resolution? I can tell. Does everybody have bad eyesight? No. If everybody agrees that something isn't noticeable, maybe you just have super good eyesight or something like that. Or it's placebo. I honestly think that's a lot of it. I think some people just say they can notice things even though there really isn't anything to notice. Their mind plays a game with them that says this is 828p, this is 1120p, and you're like, oh yeah, this is sharper because I was told it was sharper. So I think there's some placebo that goes on. Okay, so the 13 is faster in single core, but could they market the new Apple over-ears as consumer or professional? I think I'm hearing interesting things about AirPods Studio. It sounds like they're going to be somewhat modular, so different like cups and sizes and customization with the EQ. So they'll be like probably a lot of people will be split on them. Pros will be like, yeah, they're okay, but they're not great for high-end audio stuff. But they're probably going to be somewhere in the middle between a consumer product and a professional product. Let's see. 1080p on a 4K screen doesn't look terrible. No, it doesn't. 1080p is probably fine for most people. The Air would have less RAM. That is true. 4 versus 6. Maybe they'll just give it an A12. Call it a day. What did the 2018 iPad have? You guys probably answer it for a second. 2018 iPad spec. That had. What was the CPU on that thing? Why does the website not tell me? Just tell me the CPU. Featuring the same chipset as iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. Yeah, okay. So they went from the 2018 budget iPad had an A10 chip, and so did the 10.2-inch iPad. That also had an A10 chip. So yeah, if that's the case, then they could get away with updating the iPad Air with the iPad Pro design, but keeping the A12 CPU. That way they don't have to give it the A13. I could see them do that. 2 generations of iPad with the same CPU. They've proven they're willing to do that. Let's see. One of the Apple ears for a while, but now I'm considering not getting them. I love my AirPods Pro, and I want a new Apple Watch more than more headphones. Yeah, I have too many headphones already. If I do get the over-ears, it'll be for review purposes only. I will not keep them. But I'm really trying to think what they can add to them that's going to make them worth it over AirPods Pro. Sound, they just sound so much better. I'm like, I don't care that much about that. iPad 7 added RAM since the iPad 6 had trouble running more than 2 apps at the same time. Okay, well they could just not add more RAM. I think an iPad Air 4 could still happen this year. End of this year. Probably unveil it with the new iPhones or something like that. It'll just look like the iPad Pro, but with an A12 chip, maybe not A13. But no promotion, no stereo speakers, no 4K camera, but it still has Face ID. I could still see them do that. The near future, when they release AR glasses, how long will they release the glasses and phone at the same time until they discontinue the iPhone? We're gonna go down this road again, guys. Let me repeat: the AR glasses are not replacing the iPhone. They are a wearable. They will be an iPhone accessory, but by no means are they going to be able to replace the iPhone. It's not possible. There's things that you can't replicate with glasses that are just far too simple to do on a phone. FaceTime calls, keyboard, taking pictures and videos is going to be way, way harder on devices that have to be on your head. Battery life is also probably going to be trash on the AR glasses compared to the iPhone. Also, AR glasses are likely going to cost way more than an iPhone does. It's not going to be the same as an Apple Watch, which you can start at $400 to $200. Brain implants are decades away from being mainstream because anything that requires surgery is very, very complicated and hard to demo. Anything that's related to augmented reality or virtual reality is extremely difficult to demonstrate to people compared to the iPhone. It's very simple to set up. You can go to an Apple store, unbox it, set it up, and boom, you're running. Surgery is not something that's ever going to be quick and simple for the next few decades. Maybe 80 years from now it'll be really simple, but not anytime soon. Glasses are not going to replace the iPhone, people. They will enhance the iPhone, just like the Apple Watch did not replace the iPhone, and it never will. iPainting, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub for 19 months, Dev Channel 2020. Okay. Over here should have some sort of wired connection. I agree. I think if they're going to be oriented towards professional use, like I think AirPods make more sense as an iPhone accessory. If you're making over-ears, that should be oriented more so as a desktop, like people who do audio mixing on the Mac. It should be more of a Mac accessory, in my opinion, but it probably won't be just because that makes too much sense. But it doesn't have to be a headphone jack. I think it could be USB-C, like USB 4 type connectivity, so you could have really high, bit rate for audio and very, very low latency, but not the headphone jack. It would still be like a USB-C port. I will never get a brain implant. This will be my version of a boomer. Back in my day, our phones weren't in our heads. That's probably going to start coming out in our lifetime, but I don't think it will be as mainstream as smartphones. I don't think that'll be something people just run out and line up to buy. I think that if you listen to Elon Musk's latest podcast on Joe Rogan, he talked a lot about Neuralink, and it sounds like it's primarily going to be used for just helping people with brain problems at first. It'll probably be 10, 20, 30 years before it's for adding things to our life, and you're just getting it because you're a consumer and you want to improve your brain performance. Before that, it's going to be more so about people with dementia or people with pain or people with, brain disabilities. That's what it'll be primarily for. Apple could give the iPad Air an A12 in a new design, or they could do the opposite and give it an A13 and keep the old design and maybe give it promotion because of the old design. I don't know. That's basic. You basically described the 2017 iPad Pro. That's essentially what it is. Let's see. How do you feel about paying your own phone bill? Well, I don't anymore, actually, because I got enough referrals on Mint Mobile. My phone bill is free. PPI doesn't matter that much because it doesn't account for viewing distance. That is mainly true, yeah. Viewing distance has much more to do with screen density. That's why you can have a 1080p TV that looks great and a 1080p phone that also looks great because viewing distances are very different. Let's see. I don't think you can delete messages on the Twitch app. Would you sacrifice security and privacy for upgradable SSDs like they removed the T2 chip? No, I don't care about that. I don't. If I want more storage, I'll get an external one. If you want more internal storage, then you should buy it with internal storage. I don't need laptops to be more upgradable. It's a laptop. If you want it to be upgradable, get like a tower or something like that. How are you still liking the Magic Keyboard? I've noticed myself taking the iPad off more and more. I love it. I love it. Anytime I'm doing some type of typing or social media managing, I love having the keyboard and trackpad. But it's usually when I do video thumbnails that I'll pull the iPad off, and that's when I use the Apple Pencil for masking stuff. And I did that for today's thumbnail actually. And just for photo editing and video thumbnails in general, the tablet mode is fantastic. But then when I'm ready to type or use Twitter or Discord or something like that, I like switching back to the keyboard. Mint Mobile's been great. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that. I genuinely mean it. Like, their coverage has been awesome. I've not been to a lot of places where the speed is too slow to use. They've been offering unlimited data for the past couple months for people because of the pandemic. So that's been nice. And customer service has been great. No complaints. Other than their app needs to support dark mode and it needs an iOS widget support. I don't know why they haven't added that yet. I wrote an entire essay using Smart Keyboard on an iPad Pro. It was uniquely fun experience. That's good. That's good. Let's see. It's more important than display res because it makes you know how many pixels are in an inch, which would make it sharper than a big display with a higher res. I guess all are important in different ways. I would just say on a phone, though, pixels per inch after a certain amount doesn't make that big a difference. Imagine exporting a 8K 60 HDR video on the MacBook Air or live stream. Okay. Done. Imagined. You know, I wrote an entire essay in high school using my iPhone 5. I was actually like, it was due 5th period and lunch was before 5th period. So I loved my iPhone 5 when I first got it because that was like the first time. The only iOS device I had before that was an iPod Touch, and that was kind of small and the camera kind of sucked on it. And it was kind of limiting because back then your iPod only worked on Wi-Fi and the school Wi-Fi wasn't very good. But the iPhone 5, I actually had LTE. I actually had data that I could use. So that was the first time I ever had a device that was like, wait, I can have internet when I'm away from home. So that was really cool. I love using that thing. So I was like, oh, I have a assignment due next period. So I don't know how I do it because anytime I pick up a phone that small now, I'm like, how do you type on this thing? The keyboard is so tiny. But I just typed out a whole essay and sent it in. I also did an entire essay via dictation once because it was due in like 30 minutes. So I was like, shoot, I got to type this up fast. So Twitch Prime doesn't work in the iOS app, but you can do it through Safari or on a desktop. I wrote my first college admissions essay on an iPhone 6S, and I got it in. Needless to say, I didn't end up going to that school. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott. That's probably why. They were like, well, the essay was really well written, but he wrote it on an iPhone 6S, so we can't let him in. Imagine buying a $40,000 red cameras and using a bunch of color correction just to have most people watch it on an iPhone 11. Yep, that's what happens. Everybody makes their tech videos super top notch so that they can be viewed on their little iPhone screen, probably while they're scrolling through comments. So it's not even taking advantage of the 828p display. It's just going to be in the top corner of the 828p display as people scroll through comments. Exactly. My first phone was the 6 Plus, and I was like 11. Man, you were young. I didn't get a phone, let alone a smartphone. I didn't have a phone until high school, and it was the 5. It was pretty new at the time. I remember everyone was excited when I showed up to school. I pulled it out, and everyone was like, "Whoa, he has the iPhone 5." I felt that's when my Apple sheep roots were born because everyone surrounded me in the classroom for a second. Oh, you got in, you just chose not to go there. Okay, so they were like, we should let him in. He got a success. Do you think iPads will ever get haptics maybe for the next Gen Pro? Yeah, the haptics has been around since the 6S. If they wanted them on the iPads, they would have added it by now. I always wanted them to add 3D Touch to the iPads, but now 3D Touch isn't even on the iPhone, so that's a lost cause. Something must be off with the size. They just can't do haptics on a device that large for some reason. Any display can be Retina. Look up the Is This Retina calculator on Google. Well, if it's got enough pixels, yes. Yeah. Kids be getting iPhones in 3rd grade now. I know. I know. I've seen. I think I was at like a restaurant once, and I saw like a 6-year-old with an iPhone 10, and I was like, man, I really hope that's their parents. But then their parents had separate phones that they were using. They were also using iPhone 10, so I was like, oh no, how do they do this? Don't do that. I've heard people saying that the iPad Magic Keyboard gets wear and tear very easily. Do you think the Magic Keyboard could last all the way through high school 4 years without it looking too scuffed and torn up? Yeah. The material on it is not great. It definitely shows inks and fingerprints and oils and stuff. It'll probably physically work for 4 years, but it will probably show signs of wear and tear after 4 years. I would imagine so. But I can't think of a keyboard and trackpad combo I would rather use. I've seen those Logitech ones or the Bridge Pro ones, and people have been having issues with those on day one, glitches, and they're not really much better built either. I love the trackpad on that thing though. Let's see. My first phone was my mom's old Galaxy S5. I had it for 2 months until I got my sister's old 6S. Yep, he's in the hand-me-down business. Anyway, I got to work on Taylor's VV, guys, so I appreciate the Twitch Prime and the bits, but I'm going to head out and hope you guys have an excellent, safe, healthy, clean rest of your day. All right? Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.